The crystalline spires of the Grand Assembly Hall glittered beneath Astoria's twin suns, casting prismatic light across the gathered nobility. Lyra Vexilene stood apart from her peers, her violet skin a shade deeper around her cheekbones as she fought to maintain composure. Her long fingers fidgeted with the ceremonial sash indicating her house's ancient lineage. "The council recognizes Lyra of House Vexilene," announced High Elder Drav, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "You wish to address the matter of the boundary treaties?" Lyra stepped forward, the eyes of 200 nobles following her movement. "I do, Elder. I believe the restrictions placed on the outer territories are causing unnecessary suffering among suffering," interrupted Lady Nyx, a statuesque noblewoman with elaborate markings across her forehead denoting her superior rank. "The lower castes exist to serve the balance. They understand their place." Her mouth curved into a disdainful smile as scattered laughter rippled through the assembly. Lyra straightened her posture. "With respect, Lady Nyx, I've visited the territories. The resources allocated are insufficient, and children are—" "You've what?" Lord Therese exclaimed, rising from his seat. His 4 attendants immediately flanked him. "House Vexilene has been visiting the Outlands without council sanction." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Lyra felt the atmosphere shift from amusement to something darker. She had known this would happen, had prepared herself for the consequences. Yet the reality of standing alone before the entire nobility of Astoria sent a chill through her body. "I went to see the truth with my own eyes," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Our traditions speak of harmony and balance, yet we live in luxury while others suffer." High Elder Drav raised a hand for silence. "Lyra Vexilene, you have broken sacred protocols. Your actions dishonor your house and your lineage." Lady Nyx approached, the gems on her formal attire catching light with each deliberate step. "Perhaps the young Vexilene has spent too much time in the sun. Her mind appears ... compromised." She reached toward Lyra's face with mock concern. Such lovely features wasted on someone with so little understanding of her responsibilities. Lyra backed away, but found herself surrounded by nobles who had risen from their seats. Lord Terrace seized her arm. "Perhaps a period of reflection is in order," he suggested, his grip painfully tight. "In the chambers of ancestral wisdom." The implied threat was clear. The chambers were isolation cells, designed to break the will of rebellious nobles through sensory deprivation and forced meditation. "My observations are factual," Lyra insisted as 2 guards approached. "The treaties can be amended without disrupting tradition," Lady Nyx laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Listen to her. Speaking of facts, when she clearly doesn't understand the most basic principle of our society." She gestured dismissively. "Remove her before she embarrasses her house further." The guards gripped Lyra's arms, beginning to drag her toward the exit. Her ceremonial sash was torn from her shoulders, a symbolic stripping of status that brought cheers from several younger nobles. She stumbled, nearly falling as they pulled her across the polished floor. "The council is adjourned," High Elder Drav announced over the commotion. "Lady Vexilene will contemplate her transgressions in isolation until the next full alignment." As Lyra was pulled toward the grand doors, the assembled nobility broke into clusters of animated conversation. No one moved to help her. No one spoke in her defense. The family she'd been raised to believe would always protect her remained seated, her father's expression unreadable as he watched his daughter being taken away. Through the humiliation and fear, one thought sustained her: she had spoken the truth. And somehow, someway, she would make them listen. Dr. Elian Mercer adjusted the environmental settings on his suit as he followed the Astorian delegation through the crystalline corridors of the diplomatic quarter. After 3 weeks on this planet, he still found himself captivated by how the architecture seemed to breathe with light, refracting the twin suns into patterns that shifted throughout the day. "The Council is most impressed with Earth's terraforming proposals," said Minister Krell, leading the procession. "Though some members remain hesitant about increased human presence in our system," Elia nodded diplomatically. "Understandable. Cultural exchange always requires patience." He had been chosen for this mission specifically for his anthropological Background understanding alien societies was his specialty. Though Astoria presented unique challenges, its rigid caste system and complex noble hierarchies made Earth's historical monarchies seem flexible by comparison. The delegation rounded a corner toward the Grand Assembly Hall, where Elian was scheduled to present Earth's proposal for joint research facilities. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the hall's entrance-raised voices. The sound of struggle and unmistakable laughter. 2 guards emerged, roughly handling a young Astorian woman. Her violet skin was a shade darker than others Elian had encountered, with delicate, iridescent markings along her temples that caught the light as she struggled against her captors. Behind them followed a group of nobles, their expressions ranging from amusement to contempt. A spectacle indeed, Minister Krell murmured, clearly embarrassed that their human guest was witnessing this scene. Perhaps we should proceed through the eastern entrance. But Elian had stopped walking, his attention fixed on the young woman. Unlike the composed, almost artificial demeanor of other Astorians he'd met, her emotions were raw and unfiltered. And in her eyes, a startling silver against her purple skin, he saw not shame, but defiance. "What's happening?" he asked quietly. Krell hesitated. "A minor disciplinary matter. Lady Vexalian has forgotten her place." One of the nobles, a tall female with elaborate facial markings, stepped forward and roughly pulled the ornamental sash from the young woman's shoulders, causing her to stumble to her knees. "How fitting to see you there, Lyra," the noblewoman sneered. "Perhaps you should crawl back to your outland friends." Something inside Elian shifted. Whether it was the diplomatic training urging him to diffuse tensions or simply human instinct, he couldn't say. But before he could consider the political ramifications, he was already moving forward. "Excuse me?" he called out, his voice echoing in the corridor. The procession halted, all eyes turning to the human interloper, the tall, noblewoman Lady Nyx. If Elian remembered correctly from previous introductions, regarded him with cool surprise. "Dr. Mercer, this is a private Astorian matter." Elian approached slowly, keeping his posture non-threatening, but confident. "I apologize for the interruption, Lady Nyx. I was concerned someone might be injured." He extended a hand toward the kneeling woman. "Are you all right?" The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Clearly, no protocol existed for handling a human interfering in noble affairs. The young woman leery looked up at him with those striking silver eyes, confusion temporarily replacing defiance. Lady Nyx's expression hardened. "The human doesn't understand our ways clearly. Lady Vexalian is being escorted to reflection chambers for violating sacred traditions. It is not a concern of Earth's." Elian maintained his position, hand still extended. "On Earth, we have a tradition of our own, offering assistance to those in distress, regardless of circumstance." He smiled slightly. "Consider it a cultural exchange moment." A tense silence followed. Behind him, Elian could almost feel Minister Krell's diplomatic anxiety radiating like heat. Finally, Lyra reached up, her slender fingers so similar to human hands, yet with an ethereal grace, grasping his. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through his palm. As he helped her to her feet, their eyes met properly for the first time, and something unspoken passed between them. Perhaps of kindred spirits across the void of different worlds. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice musical in a way he hadn't heard from other Astorians. Lady Nyx stepped between them, breaking their connection. "How charming." The human sympathizes with a traitor. Her eyes narrowed. "Be careful where you extend your hand, Dr. Mercer. Some on Astoria bite." Minister Krell finally found his voice. "Dr. Mercer, perhaps we should continue to the presentation chamber. Lady Vexalian has matters to attend to with the council." Elian nodded reluctantly, aware that pushing further might jeopardize the entire diplomatic mission. But as the guards resumed their escort, more gently now under his watching eye, Lyra turned her head slightly. "The northern gardens," she whispered, almost imperceptibly. After second moonrise, he gave no indication he'd heard, maintaining his diplomatic composure as Minister Krell hurried the delegation away. But inside, Elian felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving on this distant world, a sense of genuine connection that transcended the careful script of interplanetary diplomacy. Hours later, his technical presentation completed and the formal dinner endured, Elian found himself standing in the northern gardens. The twin moons of Astoria cast everything in ethereal blue light, transforming the exotic flora into otherworldly sculptures. He waited, wondering if he'd misunderstood or if she'd been prevented from coming. Then a shadow moved among the luminescent flowers, and Lyra emerged, her formal attire replaced by simpler clothing. "You came," she said, a note of surprise in her voice. "I did," he replied simply, though I'm still not entirely sure why. She studied him for a moment, as if seeing a new species for the first time. "Perhaps, in many ways she was. Because you saw something wrong and couldn't ignore it," she finally answered. "A quality rare on my world," Ilian smiled. "And apparently one that gets you dragged away by guards on yours." For the first time, he saw her smile, a genuine expression that transformed her face entirely. "They didn't take me to the reflection chambers. Your intervention caused enough disruption that they merely confined me to my quarters." She stepped closer. "I wanted to thank you properly, away from those who would misinterpret our interaction." "What did you do to earn such treatment?" he asked. Her silver eyes darkened. "I spoke truth when tradition demanded silence." She gestured to the stars above them. "There's so much I want to ask you about your world, Dr. Mercer," Ilian, he corrected. "And I have just as many questions about yours." Lyra vexed Selene as the moons continued their arc across the Astorian sky. Two beings from different worlds began a conversation that would change both their lives forever. The amber light of early morning filtered through the translucent dome of Elian's assigned quarters. He rubbed his eyes, fighting fatigue after another late night in the northern gardens. For 2 weeks, he had maintained a precarious, balanced diplomatic responsibilities by day, clandestine meetings with Lyra by night. "Dr. Mercer, your presence is requested in the council chamber in 30 minutes, announced the automated system. Minister Krell emphasizes punctuality for today's treaty discussions." Elian acknowledged the reminder, quickly preparing himself. The negotiations were reaching a critical phase, with several factions of Astorian nobility now openly opposing expanded relations with Earth. His superiors, back home, were growing impatient for results, yet his thoughts continually drifted to Lyra and their conversations. She'd shown him hidden aspects of Astorian society, the beauty of their ancient poetry, the mathematical precision of their music, but also the suffering of the lower castes, carefully concealed from foreign visitors. In turn, he'd shared Earth's history, its struggles toward equality, its failures and successes. Her fascination with human concepts of freedom both touched and troubled him. Each night, their discussions grew longer, their positions closer, space between them charged with unspoken possibility. Across the city in the Vexilin family compound, Lyra stood on her private balcony, watching transportation vessels cut elegant paths through the morning sky. Her formal audience garments lay ready, but she remained in her sleeping attire, delaying the inevitable. "The family awaits, Lady Vexilin," her attendant said from the doorway. "Your father specifically requested your presence at morning meal," Lyra sighed. Since the incident at the assembly, her family had alternated between icy disapproval and attempts to remind her of her proper place. Today would be another lecture on responsibility to tradition, form. "Them I'll arrive shortly," she replied, fingers absently tracing the shape of a small earth artifact. Elian had given her a simple compass, its needle faithfully pointing north regardless of how she turned it. "Sometimes finding your true direction requires a guide," he had told her, with that warm smile that made her chest tighten in unfamiliar ways. The family meal proceeded as expected. Subtle criticisms disguised as concern, reminders of upcoming social obligations, warnings about her damaged standing among the nobility. "Lady Nyx has graciously offered to sponsor your formal apology to the council," her father mentioned, his tone making clear this was not a suggestion. "The ceremony would restore much of our house's standing." Lyra set down her utensil with deliberate care. "And what would this apology entail?" "A renunciation of your outland visits." Public acknowledgement of traditional boundaries, perhaps a pledge to undertake additional ancestral studies, he paused, and distancing yourself from certain ... foreign influences. Her heart sank. They knew about Elian. I've done nothing improper in my interactions with the Earth delegation. Improper? Perhaps not by human standards, her mother interjected, but you were seen again in the northern gardens last night. With him, alone. The servants talk, Lyra. We were discussing cultural differences. That's precisely what diplomatic missions are for. Her father's expression hardened. Your interest in human culture has been noted by those who oppose the treaty. They suggest House Vexalian may have divided loyalties.
How do we?
Lyra challenged. Have we examined whether these traditions truly serve all Astorians? Or do they merely preserve the comfort of those fortunate enough to be born noble? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, her father spoke, his voice quiet. The council votes on the Earth Treaty tomorrow. Until then, you will remain in the compound. Your communications have been restricted, and the gardens are off limits. I'm a prisoner, then? You're a daughter of House Vexalian, her mother corrected sharply. Act accordingly. Hours later, Ilian stood alone in the northern gardens, checking his timepiece for the third time. Lyra had never been late for their meetings. Something was wrong. She won't be coming, came a voice behind him. He turned to find Lady Nyx emerging from the shadows, flanked by two silent attendants. How disappointing for you. Ilian maintained his diplomatic composure. Lady Nyx, I was simply enjoying your remarkable flora before retiring. Spare me the pretense, Dr. Mercer. She circled him slowly. Your interest in our remarkable flora seems limited to one particular Vexalian blossom. Is Lyra well? He asked directly, abandoning pretense. Lady Nyx smiled coldly. Concerned? How touching. She's exactly where she belongs, remembering her duties to Astoria. She stepped closer. Unlike you, who forgets your duties to Earth each night in these gardens. Duty includes understanding Astorian culture from all perspectives.
Butch.
Duty is securing access to our technological advancements, while offering terraforming expertise in return. Her eyes narrowed. Not filling a naive noble's head with dangerous human ideals. Ilian felt anger rising but kept his expression neutral. Lyra is hardly naive. She sees the potential for Astoria to evolve while preserving what makes your culture unique. Evolution. We perfected our society millennia before humans learned to leave their planet. Lady Nyx's voice remained calm, but her eyes flashed. The Council votes tomorrow. If Earth desires this treaty, perhaps its representatives should focus on diplomacy rather than ... fraternization. After she departed, Elian remained in the garden, conflict churning inside him. His mission, the treaty. Earth's interests all now balanced against his growing feelings for a woman from another world, and the injustices she had shown him. When he finally returned to his quarters, a message waited not from Lyra, but from his Earth superiors. Secure treaty by any means necessary. Technological. Exchange critical to defense systems. Personal attachments compromise objectivity. As dawn approached, both Elian and Lyra lay awake in separate parts of the city, each facing impossible choices between duty and desire, tradition and transformation. The worlds they came from, and the world they might create together. The council chamber pulsed with tension as delegates from both worlds gathered for the treaty vote. Elian sat rigidly at the Earth's delegation's table, his formal uniform uncomfortable after weeks of adapting to Astorian fabrics. Across the chamber, the noble houses arranged themselves according to ancient hierarchies, with the Vexalian family conspicuously positioned lower than their traditional place. Public acknowledgement of their diminished status. Lyra sat beside her father, her expression carefully neutral, though Elian could see the strain in her posture. Their eyes met briefly across the chamber before she lowered her gaze. She wore formal ceremonial attire, her violet skin accentuated by the silver embroidery of her house insignia. Her long fingers clasped tightly in her lap. The sight of her made his chest tighten with an emotion he'd tried unsuccessfully to suppress. Hi. Elder! Gervais called the session to order. Today, we vote on the proposed alliance with Earth before proceedings begin. House Vexilene has requested an opportunity to address recent ... indiscretions. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as Lord Vexilene rose, placing a formal hand on Lyra's shoulder. My daughter wishes to make amends for her disrespect to our traditions. Lyra stood slowly, and Elian sensed her internal struggle, despite her composed exterior. She'd confided in him about this moment during their last meeting, the apology her family demanded, the renunciation of her beliefs they expected. He had spent a sleepless night wondering what she would choose. Honored Council, she began, her melodic voice carrying through the chamber. I stand before you to address my actions. Lady Nyx smiled triumphantly from her elevated position, her eyes flickering briefly to Elian as if to emphasize her victory. Our traditions teach that harmony requires balance, Lyra continued, that each Astorian must honor their place in the Great Order. She paused, taking a breath that seemed to draw strength from somewhere deep within. I believed I understood this teaching. The chamber fell silent, anticipating the scripted apology. Instead, Lyra's silver eyes lifted, scanning the assembled nobility with newfound resolve. But true understanding came not from ancestral texts, but from walking among those our traditions forget. From seeing children in the outer territories with insufficient rations while our storehouses overflow. Her voice strengthened. And yes, from conversations with those whose worlds evolved differently from ours. Gasps and mutters erupted. Lord Vexilina's hand tightened on his daughter's shoulder, but she gently stepped away from his grasp. I cannot apologize for seeking truth, she declared. Nor can I remain silent when tradition becomes an excuse for indifference. This is outrageous. Lady Nyx rose to her feet. She mocks our sacred ways before foreign witnesses. High Elder Drav raised his hand for silence. Lady Vexalian, you were granted this opportunity to restore harmony. Instead, you choose further disruption. I choose Astoria's future, Lyra responded. A future where alliance with Earth brings not just technological exchange, but a chance to examine our own society. Where tradition guides, but does not blind. Leon watched with a mixture of pride and dread. Her courage was magnificent, but he knew better than most the price of challenging entrenched power. His mission directives weighed heavily: secure the treaty at all costs. Lyra's defiance might destroy everything he'd worked toward. Minister Krell leaned toward him. Your friend is sabotaging years of diplomatic work, he whispered urgently. If you value this alliance, distance yourself immediately. Before Elian could respond, Lord Terrace stood. I move that House Vexilian be formally censured and removed from treaty deliberations. The human influence has clearly corrupted their judgment. I second the motion, Lady Nyx added swiftly, and propose that Lady Lyra be remanded to isolation for rehabilitation. The chamber erupted into competing voices. Ilian saw guards moving toward Lyra, whose family had stepped away from her, the ultimate symbolic abandonment. Political calculation and personal feeling waged war within him. Intervening would likely destroy the treaty, betraying his mission and potentially leaving Earth vulnerable without Astorian defensive technology. Remaining silent would betray something equally precious. In that moment of decision, the Earth's ambassador touched his arm. Remember your duty, Dr. Mercer. Leon rose to his feet. High Elder, with respect, may Earth's delegation speak? Surprise rippled through the chamber. Procedurally, foreign representatives rarely addressed internal Astorian matters. After a moment's hesitation, Elder. Elder Drav nodded. The council recognizes Dr. Elian Mercer of Earth. All eyes turned to him, including Lyra's. Her expression, a mixture of hope and fear. The weight of two worlds pressed on his shoulders as he carefully chose his next words. Honored Council, I stand before you not only as Earth's representative, but as someone who has developed deep respect for Astorian culture during my time here. Elian modulated his voice to project calm authority. Your traditions have preserved peace and prosperity for millennian achievement Earth's fragmented history cannot claim. Lady Nyx's expression shifted from hostility to cautious satisfaction. Lord Vexilion's posture relaxed slightly. However, Eliane continued, Earth's history has taught us one invaluable lesson. Societies that cannot adapt perish. Our greatest advancements came not from silencing divergent voices, but from hearing them. He moved away from the Earth delegation, stepping into the Central Flora diplomatic breach that caused his ambassador to inhale sharply. Lady Vexalion speaks not from disrespect for Astorian ways, but from love for her world and concern for its future, the same concern that brings Earth-seeking alliance. He looked directly at Lyra, no longer hiding the connection between them. In her, I've seen the best of Astoria's intelligence, compassion, and courage. If such qualities merit punishment, perhaps Earth has misunderstood what alliance with Astoria would mean. The chamber fell silent. Ilion had effectively tied the treaty. Negotiations to Lyra's treatment a diplomatic gambit that could end his career or worse, High Elder Drev studied him with ancient eyes that had witnessed centuries of Astorian politics. You speak boldly for a visitor, Dr. Mercer. Some might call it interference. Others might call it perspective, Eliane replied. Astoria seeks our terraforming technology because even your perfect society recognizes the need for change when circumstances demand it. Perhaps this moment demands similar adaptation. The silence that followed felt eternal. Finally, an elderly noble whom Eliane recognized as Lady Solario, one of the most revered council members, rose slowly from her seat. I have watched 3 centuries of Astorian history unfold, she said, her voice thin but commanding. And I have seen traditions preserve us, but also limit us. She turned to High Elder Drav. Perhaps before we vote on Earth's treaty, we should consider whether Lady Vexaline's words contain elements of truth our pride prevents us from hearing. The tide began to turn. Other nobles spoke, some supporting traditional punishment, others cautiously suggesting that Lyra's observations deserved consideration. Throughout, Lyra stood alone in the chamber's center, her eyes never leaving Eliane's. When the initial furor subsided, High Elder Drav made an unprecedented decision. The treaty vote will be delayed for 1 rotation, while the council reflects on today's proceedings. Lady Vexalion will remain under house observation, but not isolation. Dr. Mercer. He fixed Eliane with an inscrutable gaze. Your dedication to diplomatic truth is ... noted. As the session adjourned in disorder, Eliane caught a glimpse of Lyra being escorted away by her family, not roughly like before, but with a new uncertainty. She turned once, meeting his eyes with a look that conveyed everything words could not. That evening, his communication panel lit with a message from Earth Command. Treaty delay unacceptable. Explain actions immediately. Recall under consideration. Whatever came next. Eliane knew there was no returning to the careful diplomatic dance of before. For better or worse, 2 worlds had begun to change. Dawn painted Astoria's crystalline cities in shades of amber and rose as Eliane made his way through the diplomatic quarter, his official credentials prominently displayed. After 3 days of isolation and internal hearings, Earth Command had grudgingly allowed him to remain, recognizing that his unique connection with Lyra now represented their best hope for salvaging the treaty. The council reconvenes in 1 hour, Minister Krell informed him, falling into step beside him. The Astorian diplomat seemed aged by recent events, the iridescent markings on his face dulled with stress. Your intervention has created quite the disruption, Dr. Mercer. Sometimes disruption precedes progress, Eliane replied, though uncertainty gnawed at him. He hadn't seen or heard from Lyra since the council session. How is Lady Vexalion? Krell's expression remained neutral. House Vexaline has been in continuous private deliberation. It's unprecedented. They rounded a corner to find the approach to the council chamber transformed. Where usually only guards and officials stood, now clusters of Astorians gathered, not just nobles, but citizens from various castes. Their presence in this restricted area itself, a break from tradition. What's happening? Eliane asked, noticing the atmosphere of anticipation. Before Krell could answer, The crowd parted to reveal Lyra approaching from the opposite direction, flanked not by guards but by her family members. Her father walked beside her rather than ahead, a subtle but significant change in Astorian body language. Most striking was Lyra herself. She wore modified formal attire that incorporated traditional elements, but with noticeable alterations symbolizing something new. Her eyes found his immediately, and the smile that illuminated her features made his heart race. Without hesitation, she broke from her family's procession and approached him directly, another deviation from protocol that caused whispers among the onlookers. "Ilion," she said, using his first name publicly for the first time. "You risked everything." "So did you," he replied, acutely aware of the watching crowd, but unable to focus on anyone but her. "Are you all right?" "Better than all right." Her slender fingers reached for his hand, their touch sending that now familiar warmth through his skin. "My family spent 3 days in true dialogue, perhaps their first in generations." They listened. Ilion really listened. Lord Vexilene approached, his traditional haughtiness tempered by something new, uncertainty. Perhaps, but also possibility. "Dr. Mercer, my daughter speaks highly of your perspective and your courage." He inclined his head, slightly, not quite a bow, but a gesture of respect previously unthinkable toward an off-worlder. "House Vexilene has been reconsidering certain ... positions." Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere crackled with unusual energy. Traditional seating arrangements had subtly shifted, with several houses choosing positions that reflected alliance rather than ancient rivalries. Even more remarkable was the presence of representatives from the outer territories, common Astorians never before permitted in council proceedings. High Elder Drav called the session to order. "Before we reconsider the Earth Treaty, House Vexilene has requested to address recent developments." Lord Vexilene stood, but instead of speaking himself, he gestured to Lyra. She rose with graceful confidence, no longer isolated but supported by her family. Honored council, esteemed representatives of Earth, and for the first time voices from all Astoria, she began. "3 days ago we faced a choice between rigid adherence to tradition and the courage to evolve. My family has spent these days in reflection, not in isolation chambers, but in the outer territories. Seeing firsthand the conditions I described." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as Lord Vexilene nodded confirmation of this extraordinary act. "What we witnessed changed us," Lyra continued. "House Vexilene now formally proposes amendments to the boundary treaties, with resource redistribution and representation for all Astorian territories." She paused, her silver eyes finding Elion's. "We also propose that the Earth Alliance include not just technological exchange, but cultural dialogue, a chance for both worlds to learn from each other's strengths and mistakes." Lady Nyx rose to object, but found herself suddenly isolated as former allies remained seated. Lady Celeria spoke instead. "I second the proposals. 3 centuries of watching unchanging traditions has perhaps been enough." The council erupted in debate, passionate but remarkably constructive. Ilion watched in amazement as centuries of rigid protocol gave way to genuine dialogue. Throughout, Lyra stood at the center, not as a rebel, but as a bridge between worlds both. Astoria's internal divisions and the gap between their civilization and his own. When the time came to vote on the revised treaty, the outcome surprised everyone. Not unanimous support, tradition still held many in its grasp, but sufficient numbers to pass both the Earth Alliance and the initial amendments to Astorian governance. As the session concluded, Ilion found himself surrounded by Earth delegates, congratulating him on salvaging the mission, though their eyes revealed lingering concerns about his unorthodox methods. He answered their questions mechanically, his attention drawn continually to Lyra across the chamber, similarly surrounded by Astorians with questions and reactions. It was twilight when they finally found a moment alone, meeting once again in the northern gardens, where their connection had first deepened. The familiar luminescent flowers seemed brighter somehow, as if responding to the day's events. "Earth Command has requested my return," Ilion said quietly as they walked side by side. To report directly on the treaty implications, Lyra's steps faltered slightly. "When will you leave?" "Tomorrow." though they've indicated I might return as part of the permanent diplomatic contingent if Astoria approves. She turned to face him, the garden's light playing across her violet features. And if Astoria specifically requested your return, if House Vexilon required Earth's foremost cultural expert for ongoing consultation, Elian smiled, hope rising. That would be a powerful diplomatic consideration. And beyond diplomacy, she asked, her voice softer. What considerations might bring Elian Mercer back to Astoria? To these gardens? He reached for her hands, marveling at how natural it felt now to bridge the space between their worlds. I think you already know the answer to that. She stepped closer, the traditional distance between Astorians and outsiders forgotten. Show me, she whispered. Some human traditions are worth adopting. I think under the light of Astoria's rising moons, surrounded by the gentle glow of alien flowers, their lips met in a kiss that defied light years of separation and millennia of isolation. It was gentle at first, then deepened with the intensity of everything they'd risked for each other. When they finally parted, Lyra's silver eyes shimmered with emotion. That particular human custom is most illuminating. Leon laughed softly, keeping her close. There are many others worth exploring. We have time, she replied. A lifetime of cultural exchange, perhaps. As night enveloped the gardens, two beings from different worlds remained entwined, their personal revolution having sparked something larger than either had imagined possible. Around them, Astoria continued its slow awakening. While across the stars, Earth awaited news of a connection far more profound than any treaty could capture. In their embrace lay the most ancient and yet most revolutionary power in any world, the courage to see beyond boundaries, to stand against tradition when justice demanded it, and to recognize that love, in all its forms, might be the most transformative force in the universe.